either in James or First John, the scripture says that if hate exists in your heart, the love of God does not abide within you. It doesn't say if hate exists in your heart, only partially the love of God abides in you. It says the love of God does not abide in you at all. So I take that verse very literally, and I take that very seriously. If there's racism, if there's hate, if there is anything towards my brother, my neighbor that exists in my heart, I got to get that removed. I got to get that removed because it is quenching, blinding, crippling the love of God that supposedly lives within me.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So healing is our goal as a church. Like that's the thing we got to be focusing on. And the question is, how do we heal? How do we bring about God's healing to people? And I think we can find a very good example in how Jesus brought healing to the Samaritan woman, right? Like he was just crossing cultural and racial boundaries right there. And as I was reading through John chapter 4, which is the story of the Samaritan woman at the well, and just looking at how Jesus approached her and approached the conversation, he started off by putting himself at her service, or like asking her to help him. He's putting himself at her mercy. Give me water, I'm thirsty, right? He's inviting her to reach out too, just as he is reaching out. And then he gives her an opportunity to share, and he takes on the listening ear. And so that's the first thing he did. He chose to listen to her, open up a little bit about her life, and asked her more questions, and got her thinking about not just her physical need, but also her spiritual need. So he bridged the gap from being a social outcast. Like she had a physical need, but she also had a social need as a person who fell through the cracks at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Like she was despised. But before he addressed those issues, he crossed the bridge and addressed the question of where she is spiritually. That she is ultimately spiritually broken. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be the first step before she was healed socially and physically. And just seeing the transformation in the woman at the well is just very inspiring, because one thing I realized was she came to the well seeking fulfillment from the well, her physical fulfillment. And Jesus basically said, I want to put the well in you. I want to put the living well in you so that you can be the source of the living water, which is Christ, everywhere you go. And she ran back into the city. Like she forgot all about her physical thirst. She ran back into the city. She forgot all about her status and the fact that she was a social outcast. And she spoke to the people saying like, this man must be a prophet. He might be the Messiah. Come and see him because he did all these things and he said all these things to me. She was basically giving her testimony.
Yeah.
And it was a testimony powerful enough to bring the whole city after her, right? And so she started off being spiritually barren and hurt and just walking around with her head down. But she ended the story coming to Christ with all these people and all these converts. But just having that example of Jesus where he reached out to the person with a listening ear and an open hand, and also inviting that person to minister to him. because you can't minister to someone who is closed up. And so by placing her in a position where she gets to choose whether or not to open her hands, then he can enter into her life too. And so for the church, yes, speak up for the truth. Like the Bible tells us all the time. Speak up for the oppressed, stand up against injustice, the marginalized. Yes, have a listening ear and invite the other people to open their hands and say, you know what, I don't know everything. I'm as much in need as you are. So let's build each other up. And I know you're angry, I know you're hurt, and you're looking for healing. But healing starts on the inside, and healing starts when the well is placed in you.
And you know, it's really interesting as you're talking, kind of like what I'm seeing is, first let me ask you, give me simple answer, and I'm curious. As when you give us that, when you're sharing us that story about Jesus and the woman at the well, who do you see as the woman at the well? Who do you see? Do you see the Black community? Do you see the white community? Do you see the church? Because really, yeah, who do you see at the well? Who do you see? Because I know the answer is everyone, but who do you see?
Right now,
because this is going to show about our different backgrounds.
More concretely, the black community, but a little more generally, the people who are hurting as a result of racism, not just the African American, but also the Hispanics, the Asians, the poor, those who fell through the cracks of society, those who have to walk around with their head down, those who have to scurry away in fear at the sight of someone else, those who try to avoid the public because, I don't know exactly who I see, but I see the people who are hurting. So in this case, currently at the forefront of my mind is the African American community.
So I totally see, that's awesome, because your perspective is so, like, I think it's very correct. But for me, who I also see as the woman at the well is also the white community. And I see Jesus, in some sense, as the Black community, coming to the white community and asking for their service, for their hands, their help, to help get water, I also see the white community as being poor, and there's many white people as being poor in their understanding concerning racism, concerning their sin in terms of like how to help. But see, whenever Jesus called out her sin, she didn't get angry. No, she didn't. Instead, she heard him out. And whenever the Black community calls out our sin, racism, a lack of caring, a lack of love, let's not get offended and say, oh, you can keep your own water and go off somewhere else. You can get your own water. No, us to acknowledge it, not to be selfish, greedy, arrogant, prideful, but to humbly accept the Black community when they call us out on our sin. So, because it's when we get into that posture and we humbly accept when the Black community calls us out on our sin, that we get to have our own testimony. We get to have a testimony. And then that testimony is meant to be heard. It's meant to be shared. That you had racism, but someone called you out and you came to realize that you had racism. And through the power of God and through your brothers and sisters, you were able to overcome it and share that testimony with the world, which empowers other white people to acknowledge their racism, their sin, and to overcome it and testify to their other white people, to other white people.